In this video, we're going to be making a sci-fi sounding bass pad that's going to sound like this. This specific synthesizer patch will be making use of some of the more unusual wavetable playback engines, some of the effects wavetables, and also some of the more unusual noise types we can layer on top of our synthesizer patches. So let's go ahead and open up Massive and we can get started designing this patch. So the first thing we want to do is just go ahead and turn the tune control down to -12 semitones. So that way we have a lower tone to work with. And then we also want to go and keep the wavetable where it's at, but we want to change the playback engine to warp mode. And then we can leave these other settings on their default state, turn the filter down just a little bit so it filters out some of those higher frequencies, and leave the ratio where it's at by default. So far, everything with just that first wavetable sounds like this. So not very exciting by itself, but we're going to go ahead and add in some frequency modulation. So go ahead and enable PM number 1, change the type to triangle B3, and bring the modulation amount just up slightly. So that I add in some additional overtones and harmonics to our sound, which gives it a little bit more of a full and filled out distorted tone. We can also just push this filter up just slightly. The next thing that we want to do is just go ahead and go over to the second wavetable, then go over to Effects and select this wavetable, and then turn up the volume. And then we want to push that over to the right until we get this thing that looks just kind of like a sine wave, but just a little bit thicker. So maybe just push that just a little bit more over to the right until it looks about like that. And then turn the pitch up to +12 semitones. So it's 1 octave up from what this other wavetable is playing back at. And by itself, that sounds like this. And then layered in with the other oscillator, it sounds like this. So this sound is kind of reminiscent of a sine waveform, but has some additional overtones to it as well, which creates a little bit more of an interesting tone. Then we can go ahead and go over to the routing section and make a custom routing. Basically what we want to do here is just change the position of the noise. So we want to route both of those into section C. So they're routed around the filtering section of the synthesizer. Then we want to go over to the voicings tab, change that over to mono, and then turn off legato as well because this is more of a bass pad sound. Then the next thing that we want to do is just go into our amplifier envelope and make this a little bit more like a pad. So let's add in some attack. So the sound fades in slightly, make sure the sustain is all the way up, and we can boost that release just beyond halfway. So it sounds like this. And maybe we could bring that release down just slightly. Then we'll go into the noise section and add in some additional noise. So we want to change this first noise over to the chemical noise waveform. So go into the static section, then go down to chemical, and turn that amount up just slightly, so just about here. And that sounds like this. So it's got a lot of texture and overtones to it. But we also want to go in and add one more wave engine for the noise. So go over to friction, then go over to this noise, and bring up the volume just slightly. Then we also want to reduce the pitch as well. So that kind of just fills out our sound and adds some additional texture to everything. Then we want to push the gain control up to about 75 or so %. So we just get a little bit more distortion and fatness in our sound. Then we also want to add in a frequency shifter as well, which is why we routed the noise around this specific effects section so that they're not applied to the frequency shifter. So go ahead and load that up, turn the mix all the way up so we have a fully wet signal, bring the feedback down just slightly, and you could bring the frequency down just a little bit. And that sounds like this. Next, we can go ahead and add in some modulation to our signal to get a bit more movement. So let's go into the first performance envelope, and we can add in some additional points. So add that one in about 2 bars in and turn that all the way up. Make sure that the keyboard launch mode is enabled and it's turned to one-shot mode so that it only plays back this envelope once the keyboard is triggered. And then we want to go ahead and apply this to the filter mode on the wavetable. So click on that and click on the wavetable and bring that amount down to just about there. So far that sounds like this. So the sound is filtering down as the envelope is playing back. Then we can go ahead and add in some additional modulation as well with another modulation envelope. So go ahead and add in a few different points. Bring this one all the way up and this one all the way down. Then we want to apply this to the feedback modulation on the frequency shifter. So go ahead and click on that. Go to the feedback modulation and turn that all the way up until it's basically even with the start point here. And that sounds like this. So you can hear that oscillation that's happening. It gets more intense as the sound is playing back. Then we also want to add in some additional movement as well by assigning an LFO to control the pan of the synthesizer patch. So go ahead and move over to LFO number 4, change that to the free mode and bring the rate down. And then let's go ahead and assign that to the pan control. This helps provide a little bit of stereo interest and movement to the synthesizer patch. Then we want to add in some effects as well to polish out our sound. So let's go over to the stereo delay unit, bring the mix down to just about there, so about 15 or so %. Turn the sync on, make sure that both of them are set to the 16th note. Bring the flutter up so you have some pitch modulation, and bring the color down just slightly. And that sounds like this. Then the final thing that we want to do for the synthesizer patch is just add in some reverb. So go ahead and enable the reverb effect. We can leave that on the reflective mode because I find it works well for these types of sounds, especially for pads because it tends to cut out a lot of the bass frequencies inside of the reverb, so we don't get any weird phasing issues. We can go ahead and turn the color up just slightly, bring the chorus all the way up, and the completed patch sounds like this. And perhaps we can even turn down some of the intensity of this modulation. So let's go to the LFO, just turn that down just slightly. And then let's actually make a little adjustment to this as well. So we'll just bring down that feedback modulation just a little bit and maybe push that amount up. So that way those modulation amounts are just a little bit less intense. And then I could show you those notes that I played back in the introduction, which again just sounded like this. So this is a really simple note sequence. If we look at what's going on here, we just have a G note playing back for 2 bars at 120 beats per minute. And then it goes down to a C note, back up to the G, and then back down to the C note as well. So this note sequence is just moving down 7 semitones from its initial note, so 7 semitones down from this G note. And if you want to adjust the character and overall tone of the whole synth patch, you can adjust those modulation amounts on the synthesizer that we created with those envelopes to create either a more intense and modulated sound or something that's a bit softer and a bit darker, depending on how you'd like your synthesizer patch to be. So that's all for this bass pad. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.